Artemis is ready for its countdown, and the Veep will attend. Starlink will connect with regular smartphones, but competitors have similar plans. And Boeing's Starliner first crewed flight is set for next February. It's all covered in today's WSN Space Newscast.
Three, two, 1, 0.
Now, here is World Spaceflight News Editor, Randall Schutler.
Greetings! Here are today's top stories. Everything remains on track for Monday's Artemis 1 launch attempt. There is no change in the updated weather forecast, still calling for a 70% chance of go conditions. Closeouts on the SLS boosters are complete with the loading of hydrazine. The Crew Access Arm, CAA, has been retracted ahead of schedule. Tanking of the core stage begins with liquid oxygen transfer line chill-down at 12:18 a.m. Eastern Time on Monday. NASA TV coverage begins at 6:30 a.m. Although it might be expected that NASA would plan for extended daily coverage to keep us informed during the mission, the schedule for activities lists 19 days of the 42-day flight with, quote, no significant events scheduled. Perhaps the media outreach will be better than currently depicted. Maxar Technologies tweeted out 3 images of Launch Complex 39B, showing the SLS rocket standing tall on its pad. In one image, the lower half is obscured by clouds. Vice President Kamala Harris will attend the launch attempt. A White House statement said the Veep will speak about the United States leadership in space exploration and thank the NASA workforce, private sector partners, and international partners for their work. Amateur astronomer Tony Dunn posted this simulation of the flight path of Artemis during its long lunar mission. He says that the rotating frame of the animation keeps the moon's longitude stationary, making it look more elliptical. The outbound trip to the moon will take several days, during which time engineers will evaluate the spacecraft's systems. Orion will fly about 60 miles, 97 kilometers, above the surface of the moon at its closest approach, and then use the moon's gravitational force to propel Orion into a distant retrograde orbit, traveling about 40,000 miles, 64,000 kilometers, past the moon. That distance would be 30,000 miles farther than the previous record set during Apollo 13, and the farthest in space any spacecraft built for humans has flown. NASA ISS Flight Director Joshua V. Nelson tweeted this photo showing the new Artemis flight logos on the Ops Suite 3 door at the Johnson Space Center. Snoopy isn't the only toy passenger aboard Orion. ESA has Sean the sheep. Sean even has his own Twitter account. His latest tweet shows how he trained in the Columbus module mock-up in Germany. Exactly how that helps flying the Orion spacecraft, I do not know. Elon Musk hosted an announcement with T-Mobile CEO Mike Sievert at Starbase to unveil a planned capability for second-generation Starlink satellites to connect with current smartphones, at least for text messages. The new joint service is marketed as Coverage Above and Beyond and would use T-Mobile's mid-band spectrum. They touted the plan to bring cell phone connectivity everywhere, pointing out the value of service in dead zones said to encompass over 500,000 square miles in the U.S. and much more worldwide. The beta service is said to be targeted for launch late next year. Interestingly, Musk tweeted that V2 Starlink launches would begin next year, perhaps indicating that the early Starship orbital test flights will not include the satellites, which had been the earlier plan. Expansion to voice and even limited video was mentioned as a future possibility, but the focus for now is clearly on text messaging and its utility for emergency usage in remote locations. Musk claimed that the huge phased array antenna on the new Starlink was perhaps the most advanced in the world. SpaceX is not the only player in the future satellite-to-handset market. AST Space Mobile is working on satellite technology for a full 4G, 5G equivalent service, which might have much greater capacity than the Starlink system. They have preliminary partnerships with a number of carriers, including AT&T and Vodafone. Ironically, AST is using SpaceX to launch its first Blue Walker 3 test satellite coming as soon as September 7th, with plans for more Falcon 9 launches after that. Whether the two services will truly compete depends on AST's ability to deliver substantially higher bandwidth through its unique and dedicated satellites. Another satellite company, Link Global, spelled L-Y-N-K, has similar plans for satellite cellular coverage. It has 5 satellites in orbit and was the first to send a text message to a standard handset in February 2020. Rumors that Apple is interested in pursuing satellite-to-phone technologies persist, and observers are intrigued by the space theme in their latest iPhone event announcement. Satcom consultant Tim Farrar, F-A-R-R-A-R, whose Twitter profile states, quote, "I enjoy annoying billionaires," tweets that he thinks the SpaceX announcement was timed to preempt Apple's own announcement of a free messaging service with Globalstar, which might begin when the next iPhone ships. He thinks that Apple has a 2-year head start on Musk, and that Apple doesn't need the regulatory approvals that Starlink will still require. Of course, consumers should benefit from the increasing interest and competition to provide universal satellite access from smartphones. Meanwhile, at Starbase, cranes are working to remove Starship S-24, and Twitter is filled with speculation that Musk plans to stack it atop Booster 7 on the orbital launch mount in time for the Artemis launch. Stay tuned. NASA and Boeing provided an update briefing on the status of the CST-100 Starliner program. They revealed that the Crew Flight Test, or CFT, is currently targeted for launch to the ISS no earlier than February 2023. Although plans have not been finalized, the dock time is now estimated at about 8 days, somewhat less than earlier plans. In June, the NASA crew selection announcement referred to a 2-week mission, but noted that a short-duration flight with only 2 crew members would be sufficient to meet test objectives. It also said that NASA had the option to extend the dock duration to 6 months and even add another crew member. A successful CFT would open the door to the first operational mission next fall. The Boeing program manager commented on the outcome of anomaly reports from the Orbital Flight Test 2 mission in May. Here are excerpts of his comments.
These integrated systems performed extremely well, but we knew that we were going to learn something from the flight, and there was likely going to be some, what I'll call fine-tuning, that we would need to do to make those systems work together better and more like the design was intended. So there's a minimal amount of changes that we're going to be making for CFT as a result of this fine-tuning. We looked at all the in-flight anomalies, all the anomaly reports, and then, of course, the analysis that I talked about earlier for the post-test was all completed and really resulted in about 4 major areas needing to be looked at and understood really well, and then driving some changes for CFT. The first one was the Omac Thrusters. If you remember, during the flight, we had 2 thrusters that were deselected during orbital insertion. There was a very in-depth fault tree analysis that was performed, and it was determined, or it's being determined, and we're working towards flight rationale, that we had some debris related conditions that resulted in the deselection and reselecting other thrusters to enable the orbital insertion. So we have done all the inspections required on CFT to make sure that that same condition doesn't exist. and we're ready to move towards the flight rationale once we complete all of the fault tree analysis. But we've done everything we need to do on CFT to clear it. There was also on the service module and the crew module, there were RCS thrusters that were deselected as well. We've determined that the main leading cause of that is low inlet pressures and some manifold dynamics that's delayed the sensor responses. And those can be remedied by a very small change to the mission data load that's prepared for each mission. So it's really a tweak of timing and tolerances to be able to make sure that that doesn't happen to us again. So that's all in work for CFT. The active thermal conditioning system, if you remember, we had some high pump pressures that were detected during the mission. So we've determined that that was due to a restriction of flow through some of the through the lines. We found there were some filters in the system that we've determined are really not required. And so we've removed those filters to alleviate that problem from happening in the future. And then in the area of the VESTA performance, the VESTA system performed very well, but we found that it was collecting quite a bit of data and was really was more data that could be managed. So we've altered our flight software to accommodate this increase in data, and that's all part of a software revision that's currently in work. So all that work, along with the team carefully reviewing the flight software and CFT vehicle, all that has resulted in accepting, the conditions for CFT for flight. All this work has been planned into our schedules, and we've determined that launch readiness date that Steve talked about in the February timeframe. And of course, as we get closer to that date, we'll be able to get an exact date for you. The preparation of the vehicle on CFT is going extremely well. The service module and the crew module are on plan, scheduled to be mated in the November timeframe. The engineering products, the VCNs, and all the hazard reports are all in work, and we have good plans that get us to support that date in February. And then we have one flight software revision that we're doing that also will support the early February opportunity.
The commander of the CFT flight is Barry Butch Wilmore. Sonny Williams will serve as pilot. Mike Fink, whom the agency previously assigned as the Joint Operations Commander for CFT, is now training as the backup spacecraft test pilot and remains eligible for assignment to a future mission. Team Miles, Lunar Ice Cube, and BioSentinel are today's featured Artemis Cubesats.
For Team Miles and their CubeSat entry in NASA's CubeQuest Challenge, it's about propelling citizen science to the moon and beyond. Their breadbox-size Miles spacecraft is a 6U satellite built to navigate into deep space. Wesley Failer heads the group of citizen scientists and engineers that initially came together through Tampa Hackerspace in Florida, all participants in the community, nonprofit workshop. Since Hackerspace, Failer adds that the team now has experts in software development, communications, radiation, as well as project management. The entire Miles mission will be flown autonomously by a sophisticated onboard computer system and propelled by evolutionary plasma thrusters. Miles Space, in partnership with Fluid and Reason, LLC, is making use of a Model H ion thruster design for CubeSat propulsion. Failer is the inventor of the patent-pending constant Q plasma thruster, drawing upon over a decade of research in ion and plasma thrusters. We're a team of makers, not specialists. The social contract is that people will join as long as they get to try everything, says Failer. It's a very organic structure, he adds, guiding the team through a decisive yet collaborative and considerate manner. Along with plasma thrusters, the team's CubeSat features other advanced technologies, such as a software-defined radio. Still, we have to prove that our technology is probably going to work. But for us, these brand new ideas freeze the mind. It has for me, and it did for my team, Failer contends. The independent feedback from NASA has been incredibly valuable. whether you win, place, or show. Using the thruster in communication technologies, and spacecraft success in thrusting to the minimum of 4 million kilometers required for the deep space prizes, Team Miles is eyeing going farther than this size of craft has ever gone, traveling to a planned 96 million kilometers before ending the mission. Partnerships with other commercial industries have led to the formation of Miles Space, a commercial endeavor to further develop the technology and intellectual property that has come out of the design process. The Cube Quest competition offers a total of $5 million to teams that meet the challenge objectives of designing, building and delivering flight-qualified, small satellites capable of advanced operations near and beyond the Moon. The competition is sponsored by NASA's Space Technology Mission Directorate and managed by the Centennial Challenges program at NASA's Marshall Space Flight Center in Huntsville, Alabama.
We're building a satellite. We developed a 6U CubeSat
for NASA Cube Quest.
that's going into deep space.
We're children of the maker movement.
We actually formed because of the challenge.
It's become a business.
We're trying to win the farthest communication distance prize.
So we're going to actually ride the SLS.
They're dropping us off past the moon.
We get kicked out, solar panels pop open.
We're actually flying some new technology,
We've invented
a form of ionic plasma propulsion.
We're using a very minute amount of fuel to achieve a huge amount of thrust.
it's pretty revolutionary.
And we're having to develop technology just to allow for the communications that we need.
All the panels face up and it twirls
So we're developing a line of satellite dishes that are small and portable.
to track a moving satellite as it comes across the horizon.
That we can actually prove to NASA that we were able to communicate that data back to Earth successfully.
We've got passion, we've got drive, a lot of brilliant people all across the country working together to make this happen.
The Lunar Ice Cube mission, led by Morehead State University in Kentucky, will study water distribution and interaction on the Moon. The mission carries a NASA instrument called Broadband Infrared Compact High-Resolution Exploration Spectrometer, BIRCHES, to investigate the distribution of water and other organic volatiles. Lunar Ice Cube will help pave the way for human missions through significantly less expensive robotic missions and by addressing water dynamics on the Moon, said Mark Lupacella, Exploration Research and Development Manager. The BIRCHES instrument will not only help map the distribution and dynamics of water on the Moon's surface, but also in the exosphere, a very thin atmosphere-like volume surrounding the Moon. Scientists are interested in understanding the absorption and release of water from the Moon's regolith, which is comparable to soil on Earth's surface. By studying the absorption and release of water, scientists can start to map changes occurring on the Moon. Finding and understanding water on the lunar surface is vital to establishing a sustained presence on the Moon. Lunar Ice Cube plans to have a 7-hour elliptical orbit around the Moon, where it will observe the lunar surface for an hour of that time. This limited observational time is due to BIRCHES' view of the Moon. If the Sun peeks into the Lunar Ice Cube's point of view while it is observing or traveling to the Moon, the BIRCHES instrument would be permanently damaged due to the intensity of the Sun's energy on the infrared detector and other sensitive optical components within the instrument. To prevent this, the team developed a small garage-like door on the instrument that will open and close to protect the instrument. In addition to the miniaturized technology for the BIRCHES instrument, Lunar Ice Cube will feature a Busek-Bit 3-ion propulsion thruster, a new technology for CubeSats. Other pioneering commercial off-the-shelf systems include an instrument cryocooler and 120-watt solar array. The BIRCHES payload is roughly the size of an 8-inch tissue box. The team had to drastically miniaturize legacy hardware from a previous NASA mission to 1/6 of its original size. Lunar Ice Cube is a collaborative effort between NASA's Goddard Space Flight Center in Greenbelt, Maryland, NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory in Pasadena, California, NASA's Katherine Johnson Independent Verification and Validation Center in Fairmont, West Virginia, Morehead State University, MSU, and commercial partners, including the Busek Space Propulsion Company. The mission principal investigator is Dr. Pamela Clark of JPL. BioSentinel will be the first long-duration biology experiment to take place in deep space and will be among the first studies of the biological response to space radiation outside low Earth orbit in nearly 50 years. Its primary objective is to measure the impact of space radiation on living organisms, in this case, yeast, over long durations beyond low Earth orbit. Developed by NASA's Ames Research Center in California's Silicon Valley, BioSentinel will enter an orbit around the Sun via a lunar flyby. The experiment will use yeast as a living radiation detector to evaluate the effects of ambient space radiation on biology. Human cells and yeast cells have many similar biological mechanisms, including DNA damage and repair. The payload carries dry yeast cells stored in microfluidic cards, custom hardware that allows for the controlled flow of extremely small volumes of liquids that will activate and sustain the yeast. These yeast-filled cards are situated alongside a physical radiation detection instrument, developed at NASA's Johnson Space Center in Houston, that measures and characterizes the radiation environment. Results from the physical instrument will be compared to the payload's biological response. After completing a lunar flyby and spacecraft checkout, the yeast will be rehydrated at various points during the 6-month mission. As yeast cells activate in space, they will sense and respond to the radiation damage. Experiments using the BioSentinel instruments will also take place on the International Space Station and on the ground to demonstrate how varied amounts of radiation affect the yeast. While Earthbound research has helped identify some of the potential effects of space radiation on living organisms, no terrestrial source can fully simulate the unique radiation environment of deep space. BioSentinel's data will provide critical insight on the effects of deep space radiation on biology as NASA seeks to establish long-term human exploration of the Moon under Artemis and prepare us for human exploration on Mars. BioSentinel's microfluidics card, designed at NASA Ames, will be used to study the impact of interplanetary space radiation on yeast. Dry yeast cells are stored in microfluidic cards inside a 6-unit, or 6U, CubeSat spacecraft that weighs about 30 pounds. The spacecraft will be deployed from the second stage of the launch vehicle to a lunar flyby trajectory, from which it will enter an Earth-like heliocentric orbit. After completing the lunar flyby and spacecraft checkout, the science mission phase begins with the rehydration of the first set of 2 yeast-containing microfluidic cards. Each card has 16 wells, 8 containing the wild-type strain, and 8 containing the radiation-sensitized strain Rad51 Delta. Each set of fluidic cards is expected to be in its active mode for up to a week following rehydration. Sets of cards will be activated at different time points over the 6 to 12-month mission. One reserve set of cards will be activated in the occurrence of a solar particle event, SPE, a powerful radiation storm that poses a significant risk to astronauts on long-duration deep space missions. Payload science data will be stored on board the spacecraft and downlinked to Earth via telemetry. Growth and metabolic activity of the yeast cells will be measured using a 3-color LED detection system and the metabolic indicator di-Alamar blue. Biological measurements will be compared to radiation data provided by an onboard physical sensor and dosimeter, and LET spectrometer, to obtain total ionizing radiation dose and particle characterization, and to Earth-based experiments using relevant energetic particle types, energies, and doses. Additionally, 2 identical BioSentinel payloads will be developed, one for the International Space Station, which will be in similar microgravity conditions but a comparatively low radiation environment, and one for use as a delayed synchronous ground control at Earth gravity and Earth surface level radiation. Thus, the BioSentinel payload will help calibrate the biological effects of radiation in deep space to analogous measurements conducted on Earth and on the ISS. The BioSentinel mission is funded by the Advanced Exploration Systems Program within the Human Exploration and Operations Mission Directorate at NASA headquarters. Partner organizations include NASA Ames Research Center for the development of BioSentinel and NASA Johnson Space Center for the LET spectrometer. The project manager is Matthew Napoli at Ames, and the lead scientist is Sergio Santamaria. Antonio Rico is the lead technologist. At NASA headquarters, Andreas Martinez is the Advanced Exploration Systems Program Executive.
Unfortunately, Team Miles and Lunar Ice Cube were not recharged in preparation for the launch. Yesterday, we featured the exciting news of Webb's exoplanet atmosphere discovery. Here is a video produced by ESA which discusses those findings. From the Twitterverse, Jim Williams, Air Force Space Force Chief of Public Affairs, tweeted these amusing graphics with lunar-themed dad jokes in honor of the Artemis 1 launch. If you'd like to join the conversation, check out his Twitter feed.
Benjamin Baer, an engineer at KSC who has helped prepare Artemis for launch, is a skilled photographer. Here, he composited 2 of his photographs to create a wonderful image of the rocket against the crescent moon. You can visit his website at blairwitnessphoto.com to discover more images. Here is the current WSN estimate of scheduled launches through the month of September. Saturday's Starlink launch is up next, followed by Artemis. 3 more Starlink Falcon 9 launches are on tap. Yesterday's loser, AST SpaceMobile, is the only winner in today's market action. Apparently, the SpaceX and T-Mobile partnership announcement on Thursday evening was considered less threatening to AST's overall prospects than feared. All the others on the watch list were collateral damage from the major sell-off, which was triggered by the hawkish comments of Fed Chairman Powell. This is correspondent Karen Calvis, reporting from cyberspace.
Tomorrow, we'll have an in-depth look at new discoveries by the Perseverance rover in Jezero Crater on the planet Mars. Hint, it's all about the rocks. And that's the way space is today. Until tomorrow, ad in explorata, toward the unknown in the measureless arena of space. Stay tough and competent, and thanks for watching.